we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's May 15th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainha.
Happy Monday, everyone!
And Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, last Friday, a court in Montenegro agreed to release Do Kwon and his former chief financial officer on bail worth around $440,000 each. The two men will be under surveillance by police and prohibited from leaving their apartment. The U.S. and Korea are still waiting for the two, as they have requested Do Kwon's extradition. Back in May last year, Kwon and his aide were charged over manipulating the market and scamming investors through their crypto enterprise, Terraform Labs. Now, on Friday, a fire broke out at South Korea's biggest theme park, Everland. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, and the fire was extinguished in just 20 minutes. Now, this 38-year-old man played a big part. He's Cho Chan-dong, who's actually a firefighter himself, who happened to be at the theme park with his family on his day off. Now, even though he was off duty, Cho ran towards the fire as soon as he saw flames and used a nearby fire extinguisher until dozens of firefighters joined him at the site. Now, did you know South Korea has around 500 no-kid zones? This doesn't include bars or nightclubs. And recently, the Washington Post published an article questioning whether this type of ordinance is discrimination against families with children or a liberty granted upon business owners and users. Now, the article pinpointed how no-kid zones reflect how children are seen as a lifestyle choice rather than an integral part of a healthy society, citing birth rates falling globally over the past 70 years. Now, this has drawn up debate here in Korea, which has the lowest fertility rates in the world. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. Now, no-kid zones aren't just confined to Korea. Other parts of the world, like the US, UK, Canada, and Germany, have also had many debates on whether restricting children from entering certain restaurants, cafes, or even certain seats on airlines is appropriate. Supporters of no-kid zones say it's up to the business owners to choose what is allowed, but opponents say this can stigmatize children and deny them the basic right to be in public places. So here at the studio, I would like to hear what you guys have to say about these no-kid zones, starting with Ki-hoon. Are you for or against them?
To be honest, my answer would really depend on my situation. But you know, for now, I think I lean more towards the for only because there are more kid zones than no kid zones here in Korea for now. You know, kids are an integral part of the society, and definitely, you know, we need them for the future as well. But at the same time, if I were the restaurant owner, I would have the right to set my own entrance policies for my own interest and for my own benefit. So I think parents can actually choose, you know, to not go there, and they have different options like kids cafes. So I think in my perspective, changing these rules is not going to reduce the fertility rate immediately here in Korea. So I think, you know, there are more fundamental aspects that the government and policymakers need to make to really balance this matter out.
For sure. And initially in the Washington Post article, they talked about whether you're for or against these kid zones. But the bigger question that was raised was whether who should be responsible for tolerating and managing the kids out there. So what are your thoughts on this, Cheska?
Oh, that is such a tricky question. And I love these discussion topics because they raise us a lot of questions. But I think that this kind of reminds me of, do you remember at McDonald's, they used to have a playground for kids?
I do.
Right?
I used to play there.
I loved it there. I love this. Like, you can get a Happy Meal and then get little toys and then go to the... So what I'm trying to say is it's a matter of perspective, whether about not allowing kids or allowing kids. But how about we let children just be children in places? So maybe a yes kid zone where children can roam around, scream a little, make a scene, just like how children are supposed to be.
Right, and maybe if we see more of these yes kids zones, this could actually boost up fertility rates.
That's what I'm thinking.
For sure, that's a good idea. Now let's move on to our discussion topic for today. Today is Teachers' Day here in South Korea, but over the past few years, how students perceive and treat their teachers has become quite controversial, especially because the older generation wouldn't ever dare think of trying half the things kids these days seem to be doing. And to find out more, take a look at the screen. These few verses might be familiar to baby boomers and Gen X in Korea. It's part of the once well-known and taught teacher appreciation song sung by students on Teachers' Day. Nowadays, though, kids don't learn the song at school or are required to sing it. As a matter of fact, some don't even know the song's existence as a whole, which shows how much the perception towards teachers has changed over time. Today, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. How do young people in Korea perceive teachers? 2. A lot of older people chastise the younger generations for not showing as much respect towards teachers as they did. Is this true? Do kids these days go over the line at school? 3. This seems to be the case in other parts of the world. How are other countries trying to better protect and promote respect for teachers? Now, May 15th is Teachers' Day here in Korea. And Cheska, why don't you tell us what this day means and how we celebrate it here in the country?
Yes, today is Teachers' Day and it is nationally recognized and celebrated right here in South Korea. It is actually derived from the birthday of King Sejong.
Really?
Sejong, really?
Yes, I did not know that. He is the founder of South Korean characters we use today and one of the nominally great kings of our 5,000 years South Korea history. And he's regarded as, quote, the teacher of all Koreans. And much like we do for Parents' Day, we adorn our teachers, professors, and mentors with carnation flowers. And
Yes.
you've got to help me out here.
Okay.
I know you remember this song. So in Korea, we sing this song in elementary school.
We do.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, ready?
스승의 은혜는 하늘 같아서 우러러 볼수록 높아만 주네.
Hey, we nailed it. We actually nailed it. I
Why
can't
am
believe
I
we still
embarrassed?
remember.
I think I did my job for the today. I think I'm ready to go home.
All right.
And the song kind of ends up with, we're so grateful for our
Right.
teachers' love and guidance.
Yes.
The lyrics is very touching, but it kind of puts the teacher on a bit of pedestal. So there have been a lot of talks about that as well.
For sure. But actually, we're seeing fewer people want to become teachers nowadays, mainly because of how students perceive and treat them. And just yesterday, the Korean Federation of Teachers Association surveyed roughly 7,000 teachers, and only 2 out of 10 of them said they were satisfied with where they are. And mainly because most felt powerless and didn't have enough protection to rightfully guide or restrict students from misbehaving. In other words, teachers seem to have lost a lot of their so-called authority in the classroom. So why don't you, Cheska, tell us more about this situation?
Sure, and it seems to be the case, and it's disheartening to hear, given that I've had many great teachers who taught me certain things and I respected them. But it seems to be the case, and if we take a look at the screen, we can see how much teachers go through on a daily basis. So this data shows that more than 60% of teachers go through at least one case of a student misbehaving or acting out in the classroom every day of the school week.
6 out of 10 have that experience. Wow. Okay.
And there have been numerous reports of blatantly rude and vulgar comments about teachers, being spreading on social media now that everyone is able to post things.
And filming everything their teachers do,
That's
right?
a great comment. And if we take a look at this video, there is a shocking incident that happened where a middle school student, shirtless, lying down on the podium, recording the female teacher during the class, which was uploaded on TikTok for everyone to see. And see, and
the shirtless student over there
just
in
has-
class.
in classroom, during a classroom while teachers teaching in front. And all of these kind of raise important questions on what the proper dynamic should be between teachers and students in schools.
I don't know about you, Kyun. When I saw this video, this was actually a video right there. We have screenshots. But when I saw it, I was quite enraged because you can never imagine seeing that in the classroom, right?
Exactly.
Now, I would like to ask you guys then, what do you guys think of teachers losing their so-called authority or power? I mean, just as I mentioned before, I was enraged because I could never imagine that in the classrooms I've been in the past. What about you?
Well, I mean, compared to the past, teachers' roles in authority in public education has dropped significantly
For sure.
many different factors. One, teachers not being able to scold their students physically and verbally. The increase in importance of in private education, where parents put more focus and investment for the, success of their children to enter, more competitive universities. And obviously this caused more teachers to, pursue a teaching career in the private sector
Right.
rather than the public education. And obviously, declining fertility rate meant less students in classrooms, thus less support from governments, weakening the workforce in public education. So I think these factors all play a big part in the loss of power and authority of teachers in classrooms. And also the socio-economic stance of Korea, where it's changed so much that the success of a student just purely depends on their grades and
Very true.
rather than having, discipline and really showing proper respect to their teachers. So I think it's a social matter as well.
That's a very good point. The hyper-competitive society has actually urged students to feel like their grades matter more than how disciplined they are.
Definitely.
Do you have anything to add on to this question?
Before we go on, I find it very interesting that we use the word, quote, authority when we describe this power dynamic between students and teachers, because I think it's a very Confucius culture
For sure.
that we have of respecting our mentors that guided us. And I was educated in the States, and even if I go back now, I probably wouldn't say that they have any authoritative right to rule over me or punish me physically or even say, words that might be disrespectful, even though I respect them as teachers.
Yeah, it's relatively a Korean concept, I think, calling teachers having the so-called authority. I think globally it should be recognized as having more respect, right?
Exactly.
For sure.
And there have been various researches on why this has happened in South Korea, and half of the respondents actually said that it's probably because of the improper balance between the rights of the students and that of teachers. But I think we all agree that every right comes with responsibility.
For sure.
And as we have seen in the high school violence and bullying cases, there have been incidents when the students and parents had to speak up because of the lack of involvement in schools. However, if the students want to demand more rights, then they should also show their responsibilities and respect towards teachers, and of course, vice versa.
And disrespecting teachers has become a serious issue globally. Just recently, last month, we've seen a very controversial video on TikTok go viral. An American singer-songwriter, Meghantrainor, actually used the words F teachers in a very heated discussion on her podcast. And this was referring to how some teachers in the past bullied her.
Exactly.
But then she later apologized for generalizing all teachers who are, out there to take care of us. And she said that they have the hardest jobs in the world. Most are underpaid. And on that note, that's what's happening in the United States. But as a person who's lived most of his life abroad in Australia, tell us how the disrespecting teacher situation is like.
I think, it's pretty much the same in all countries. To me personally, it all depends on the student's attitude.
Right.
That's a very
as
good
a whole,
point.
in a classroom setting.
Yes.
So if they're all willing to learn, I guess the teachers will put in the extra effort to teach them more academically and all about all the other things that we need as students. But on the other hand, if the students are not willing to learn or even listen to the teachers, I think it's totally right for the teachers to, not really play that teacher's role of, trying to teach them, because even if I were a teacher, if my students weren't listening, I wouldn't really go through the trouble of stressing out every day, trying to, teach them when they're not listening.
Yeah,
in
when they don't
general.
seem motivated.
Exactly. So I think it's not really about, what country, what kind of education system they have. It's all about how students view their teachers in general. Yeah.
And I think the more I age, I realize that it's all a human-to-human relation. Back when I was young, I thought of teachers as just like my teacher,
Right. The adult who's supposed to know everything and tell me anything.
And unconditionally loves and protects me. But now that I'm getting older, I realize they're teachers, they're young adults themselves, still looking for ways to go on with life.
That's very true.
And why don't we include an actual teacher to hear his thought on today's discussion topic? We'll be back right after this. We're now going to include a high school math teacher in our discussion to find out what he has to say on teachers losing more of their power or so-called respect and authority in the classroom. Please welcome Yoon Yong-hun. Welcome, Yong-hun.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, Yong-hun, I hear that you've experienced teaching in both Korea and the States for around 10 years now, so we'd like to hear you speak on behalf of teachers in both countries. Do you think teachers in the States have lost their respect as much as Korean teachers have done, and has this gotten worse over time?
It's hard to make a direct comparison, but the teachers in the U.S. have definitely lost their authority and respect in slightly different ways, I would say. There's a famous two-cut cartoon that compares parent-teacher conference in 1960 and 2010. In both cuts, the parents are yelling, "These grades are terrible," and in the 1961, they're yelling to the the student, and in the 2010 one, they're yelling to the teacher. So similar to Korea, accountability for grades, learning, and even behavior integrity have fallen on the shoulders of teachers in the U.S. Now, this responsibility is doubled with low pay, as some of you mentioned, and so they have to get a second job, and while having to pay for classroom materials out of their own pocket sometimes. And what seems to happen for me when I see it, when they have all these hats and responsibilities and moving parts, if they do not perform well, teachers are criticized as and undermined as incompetent, and then the cycle repeats.
And I think
yes.
Sorry, please go on. Yes.
Oh no. What I feel like the student misbehavior tells is not necessarily the students are evil. I think they mirror this kind of attitude and this kind of change in the culture. As much as I feel like students, as much as I believe that students are whole people, they're impressionable, and I think they kind of absorb that cultural change, and that's why we don't see the reference that the older generations remember.
I think you mentioned a really important word, impressionable, and they're all young children. They learn from the adults, and you gave an example of this cartoon where the parents are yelling at the children first in the past, and now they're yelling at the teachers, and then children sort of learn from that, right? So could you give us specific examples or personal experience of students actually disrespecting teachers, or they have impressioned somehow?
Oh, there's so many. Using profanity or extremely rude emails that they would never say to my face, which I feel like are all parent behaviors that I've also noticed. But sometimes it's the simple ones that really dig. Like when one of my students said, my parents pay for your salary, as if I were their servant or worker, as opposed to professional or a teacher. And I want to highlight that this is, again, like this is not materializing from thin air. They're mirroring, they're reflecting either the disrespect, like outright disrespect, or lack of, or the act of respect that we adults, I believe, have failed to upkeep. So I feel like that's more of the thing. And when I hear from my colleagues, they seem to have a lot harder of a time feeling respected by the administration and parent community, the adults, than students. They understand if students misbehave, they're students, they're impressionable, they're growing, But I think it's really hard for at least U.S. teachers, from what I hear, when they feel like they're not treated as adults, or even adults as, sometimes.
I absolutely agree with you, because I used to teach elementary school students as well, English, and some of them really made those rude remarks, and I really couldn't say anything to their faces, because, at the end of the day, they're children, and I couldn't say anything to their parents either. Anyway, but I hear the United States aims to protect teachers' authority effectively. What are some measures taking in place right now?
So what I'm hearing is that for disrespect and violence, even against teachers by students, I'm hearing that the court system will be more strict. I don't know how that's going to work out. And there are programs that require schools to look into restorative justice practices, which promote healthier, more meaningful discipline. But honestly, my colleagues and I don't like, and I've been asking this question for myself too, and my colleagues. We don't really see particularly meaningful measures that are in place that's protecting teachers' authority. But honestly, I don't know if what teachers need is a bigger stick to keep students in line or to protect ourselves. I think we need to feel respected and trusted by the adults in the community, particularly administrators and the parents. And this could involve listening to teacher inputs when there are decisions being made, or maybe listening to the demands, or actually listening to the demands of the teacher unions when they feel like their voices need to be heard, instead of prioritizing budget or appearance.
For sure, because the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree. It's all based on what we young adults do to better change the perspective. Thank you so much, Yong-hoon, and happy Teachers Day.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Now we're going to swiftly move on to what our viewers had to say based on today's discussion topic, and we asked them about how students treat teachers in their country. Falika Peto said in our country, teachers are treated like our friends. They would rather tell us to call them big brother or sister instead of calling them sir or madam. Now Benny said, our teachers in my country, the Philippines, sometimes feel surprised or shocked because they want to change their salaries and workload sometimes. Tiras Bell says teachers here in the States are severely underpaid, especially kindergarten to grade 12 teachers, and conditions are deteriorating. There were several times when my teachers went on strike due to some of these conditions. It's sad because a lot of teachers truly care about their students, but they're not shown the respect that they deserve. So based on what our viewers had to say and what Yong-hoon told us, what do you guys think is the best way to deal with teachers losing their respect in the classroom?
I really want to thank Mr. Yoon today for speaking, because I actually learned something. I thought it was about this improper balance between student rights or student responsibility in teachers, but he actually said we don't need a bigger stick. It's about how the adults treat adults that kids learn from.
For sure.
So it actually made me think again and say it's more about how parents treat teachers, or how teachers, interact with parents. That is probably more important than educating students on this level.
For sure. What about you, Ki-hoon?
Me too. I think there needs to be a better communication channel between teachers, parents, and students. So that would really alleviate these kind of issues that are arising right now. So a bit more communication, and like you said, like between adults, not treating teachers like slaves
Or servants.
Someone I
servants
pay,
to their children. So I think if these kind of things change, I mean, there could be better future.
And in light of Teachers Day, we hope that news generation could, pave the way for that type of behavior to happen. And all right, we'll wrap up here now.
Yes.
And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska
The
Dainhong
pleasure's all mine. Thank
and
you.
Park Ki-hoon.
It's my pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.